الحمد لله الذي له ملك السماوات والأرض ولم يتخذ ولدا ولم يكن له شريك في الملك وخلق كل شيء فقدره تقديرا. يا أيها النبي إنا أرسلناك شاهدا ومبشرا ونذيرا وداعيا إلى الله بإذنه وسراجا منيرا وبشر المؤمنين بأن لهم من الله فضلا كبيرا ولا تطع الكافرين والمنافقين ودع أذاهم وتوكل على الله وكفى بالله وكيلا. وتوكل على الحي الذي لا يموت وتوكل على العزيز الرحيم الذي يراك حين تقوم وتقلبك في الساجدين إنه هو السميع العليم. الصلاة والسلام على الأشرف الأنبياء إمام المرسلين خاتم النبيين بالقاسم محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أهل بيتي الطيبين الطاهرين. بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ألم يجدك يتيما فآوى ووجدك ضالا فهدى ووجدك عائلا فأغنى فأما اليتيم فلا تقهر وأما السائل فلا تنهر وأما بنعمة ربك فحدث. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوات. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. آمين يا رب العالمين. السلام عليكم. Jummah Mubarak. Welcome Qasim, first time here. Glad to have you here. And Munna Sahib, welcome back. Welcome. Today what I want to go over, actually it's a continuation from last week. For those of us that weren't here last week, we got into Surah Duha, which is Surah 93 of the Holy Quran. And it's a Meccan surah. We went over the fact that it was a piecemeal revelation, the Quran. It didn't come all at once. Rather, it was spread out throughout a 23-year period of the journey of Rasulullah. And so Surah Duha was a very early revelation in the Quran. And what we established was that there was a huge pause between the first few ayahs or surahs that were revealed to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Before Surah Ad-Duha came, and some historians and some hadith go as far as saying that there was a 3-month pause between those revelations prior to Surah Ad-Duha coming. So we established certain feelings that Prophet Muhammad might have been feeling of anxiety, of abandonment, of the fact that maybe he did something wrong, that the revelation had paused for a brief moment. And so we looked at, what I forgot to mention last week is that Surah Ad-Duha is divided into 3 categories. The first category is to correct Rasulullah and to let him know that no, God has not left you. And just like the duha, which is the morning brightness, and the layli wal-layli idha saja, which is the stillness of the night, there is going to be pauses in revelation. And there are going to be pauses in the good things that we experience in the world. And we went over factors as to why those pauses are beneficial. Number 1, they give us a sense of gratitude, appreciation of the blessings that we have. And number 2, they give us an opportunity to digest certain things that are coming into our life that may be too heavy for us to appreciate all at once. And so that's why it was a piecemeal revelation to Rasulullah. And so God goes on to say, وَالضُّحَى وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا سَجَى مَا وَدَّعَكَ رَبُّكَ وَمَا قَلَى. Your Lord has not closed you off. وَدَّعَكَ means closed you off for no re-entry. Nor has He tossed you away, or nor has He thrown you away. You know, you're still very important, your mission is still very important. ما ودعك ربك وما قلى وللآخرة خير لك من الأولى ولسوف يؤتيك ربك فترضى. And the akhirah, what's about to come to you in this world and in the hereafter, is much better than the start of your mission. You know, sometimes the start of our missions and start of certain businesses and certain projects we take on are very difficult. And so God is also speaking to us by letting us know that your akhirat, guaranteed, if you stick on the right path, is going to be better than the beginning. And I'm going to give you so much, وَلَسَوْفَ يُعْطِيكَ رَبُّكَ فَتَرْضَى. We will give you so much that your heart will be content. So that's the first category. Now we're going to go on to the second category. And the second category consists of questions posed to Rasulullah, almost taking him back in his personal history. So the first question that's posed to Rasulullah is, أَلَمْ يَجِدْكَ يَتِيمًا فَآوَى. And that translates into, did he not find you an orphan and take you in. So these questions that Allah is posing and taking Rasulullah back into history, does anybody have an idea of why going back and looking at certain things that we've been through can be beneficial to us in our present moment? Just if anybody has any ideas, we can just go over that. Why would the idea of going back into history for Rasulullah bring more of an awareness in his present moment, and how would it benefit him considering the situation that he's in? Alam yajidka yatiman fa'awa. And don't you remember, he found you he found you as an orphan and he took you in. So what can be the benefits of reminding Rasulullah of this thing? And then we'll go over. Anybody know? Okay, so it serves a multi-purpose, right? So number one, knowing our history and knowing that certain things have happened, certain hardships that we've been through, can create a sort of certitude as to that, give it a positive outlook as to why those hardships can be something positive. So if it wasn't for Rasulullah being a yatim, an orphan, maybe he would not have ended up at the destiny which was already planned for him. So certain hardships get us ready, get us prepared. Certain struggles. There's a quote from a very prominent person. I don't remember his name, but it goes by the saying that goes, hardships often prepare ordinary people for extraordinary destinies, right? So Allah is reminding Rasulullah that, hey, you know what, this hardship that you've been through, it was for a reason, and now think about it for a second. And it's almost to let us know that human beings are very forgetful. We sometimes forget things that have happened to us. So bringing it to light can give us a new sort of perspective as to where we are currently. The word insan is based in nasiya, and nasiya actually means forgetful. So human being is created forgetful. And that's why in the Quran, over and over again, one of the connective statements, أَفَلَا تَذَكَّرُونَ, don't you remember? So God is almost trying to get us to remember certain things that have happened in the past so that we can be in a position of awareness in the present. And so we can plan for our future, which is the akhirah to come. So alam yajidka yatiman fa'awa. So let's look at the history of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. So Akil, you brought up a really good question last week, and I just want to go further into that. So what Akil's question is that if the prophets already knew that they were going to be prophets, right? Why would they have certain emotions of like doubt and fear, for example, confusion sometimes, anxiety? So I just wanted to go over that more in detail right now, is that there is a sort of destiny that is presented in the Quran, that certain great figures such as our prophets and imams already got chosen by Allah. So even if you look at Bibi Maryam alayhi salatu wasalam in Surah Ali Imran, Allah says to her that we've chosen you above all the women in the world. And the name of that is Mustafa. Mustafa means the chosen one, and that's one of the names of Rasulullah. So God had already chosen a destiny for Rasulullah, as He had chosen a destiny for Prophet Musa alayhi salam, as He had chosen a destiny for Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam. And we're going to go over those two stories of Prophet Musa and Prophet Yusuf just to draw a parallel into the life of Rasulullah. So God had chosen it, but in the conscious thought of those prophets, they didn't know that they were prophets until a certain qadr, which means a certain fate or destiny had taken place for them to come to the realization that they had been chosen by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Assalamu alaikum. And so if you look at the journey of Prophet Rasulullah, he didn't know that he had been chosen to be a prophet, although Allah had chosen him, until he got to Jabal al-Nur and the revelation came to him. So I just want to divert into the story of Nabi Musa alayhi salam right now. Nabi Musa alayhi salam, his mother was told to throw him into the ocean in a cradle, in a box, sorry. And so there was a challenge for his mother there. Then there was a challenge for Nabi Musa when he was found that he actually murdered a person, it says in the Quran. And it says Allah forgave him. And He created the way, almost like the destiny had taken place through all the hardships that Nabi Musa had faced, to come to the point of the destined place near the fire where the revelation got revealed to Nabi Musa alayhi salam. So there's a parallel with Rasulullah, that all the hardships that he faced as a youth, and we'll go over more of those in these 3 questions that Allah poses, such as him being a yatim, And so God is teaching us that certain things that have happened to us of hardships in the past can actually serve as a benefit and as a blessing for us in the future. So some of us have lost our mothers here, and some of us have lost our mothers at an early age. And so that is a way that we can relate to the story of Rasulullah. That is a way that the Quran can speak to us. And so just because we have suffered a hardship does not mean that we get down on ourselves. We have to have this positive outlook that, hey, we came into existence for a reason. God, just as He has chosen, obviously their mission was much more than what we are granted or what we are told to do. But if we reflect and if we remember, we can also subconsciously put to light the reasons as to why we are present in this world, certain hardships that we've faced. So it's an idea that Allah is asking these 3 questions to Rasulullah. Alam yajidka yatiman fa'awa. Didn't we find you an orphan and we took you in? It's almost telling us to also look at our history and to appreciate the hardships, because they are strengthening us for what could be our mission in life. So the second question that is posed by Allah is وَوَجَدَكَ ضَالًّا فَهَدَى. So the literal translation of that is, and we found you lost, and He found you lost, Allah, and guided you. So we can connect to that in so many ways, right? Rasulullah was not lost, but his community was lost. The situation that he was presented in Makkah, pre-Islamic Arabia, was that of Jahiliyyah, was that of complete ignorance. So his people and his community were in darknesses, and he was looking for an answer. He detached himself. Like it says in the Quran, even Bibi Maryam detached herself from the wrongdoers, and then the angel Jibreel came to her with the news of Nabi Isa alayhi salatu wasalam being gifted to her. So similarly, when Rasulullah found himself lost, Allah guided him. And first he had to reject the evil, he had to reject the ignorance, he had to reject the darknesses, and the light became available to him. And so he got called to his destiny in Jabal Nur when the revelation of the Quran came down to him. وَوَجَدَكَ ضَالًّا فَهَدَى. And He found you lost and guided you. And the third verse of the second category is وَوَجَدَكَ عَائِلًا فَأَغْنَى. And we found you in great need. And some definitions say that وَوَجَدَكَ عَائِلًا فَأَغْنَى is that we found you poor and we gave you self-sustenance. But it could also mean that we found you in need, because a'ila actually means in need of something. And we'll see how the last category of this surah kind of just balances out the surah perfectly. So Rasulullah was in a need, he was in a spiritual need. He found his people in darknesses. And Allah saw that. And so وَوَجَدَكَ عَائِلًا فَأَغْنَى. He took his need and sustained it with revelation, and sustained it, and also his physical needs of not being wealthy, and gave him sustenance, right? And so the 3 categories, once again, is a consolation at the beginning, then there's questions to take us back into history, and now the final category of Surah Duha is to give a purpose and a lesson and to pay it forward. So just as Allah had reminded Rasulullah of the blessings that He gave him in terms of being an orphan, taking him in terms of being in need, giving him sustenance, and in terms of finding him lost and guiding him, similarly now He's telling Rasulullah and He's giving him a purpose now. So the ayahs go on to say, فَأَمَّا الْيَتِيمَ فَلَا تَقْهَرْ. So it balances it out. We found you an orphan and we took you in. فَأَمَّا الْيَتِيمَ فَلَا تَقْهَرْ. So now, don't oppress the orphan. Sometimes when hardships have come into our lives, for some of us who got bullied, let's say when we were younger, there's 2 options. You can become a bully because you suffered so much hardship, or you can become empathetic with people who are bullied, right? You can develop that sense of compassion. So Allah is telling Rasulullah to now develop that compassion of the hurt that he felt when he was a young child. فَأَمَّا الْيَتِيمَ فَلَا تَقْهَرْ. So the orphan, do not oppress them. فَأَمَّا الْيَتِيمَ فَلَا تَقْهَرْ وَأَمَّا السَّائِلَ فَلَا تَنْهَرْ. So the one who's now coming to you begging, okay, Because remember, it said, وَوَجَدَكَ عَائِلًا فَأَغْنَى. We found you in need and we gave you what you needed. So now when someone else comes to you in need, even in spiritual need of a guidance, of consolation, فَأَمَّا الْيَتِيمَ فَلَا تَقْهَرْ وَأَمَّا السَّائِلَ فَلَا تَنْهَرْ. Do not repel him. Take him in. Give him the guidance from what we have blessed you with. So there's certain gifts that we have been given, all of us, whether it be intelligence, a sense of, purpose, money. All these things are ni'mat from Allah, And God is letting Rasulullah know that it wasn't you who established all this for you. All praise does indeed belong to me at the end of the day. So God is giving that reminder to Rasulullah, and He's saying that if it came from me, now pay it forward. And we all have the capacity to pay that forward in our lives. Certain hardships that we've been through, challenges that we've been through, we cannot turn around and become bitter about it. We cannot try to seek vengeance for the injustices that have happened in our lives. Instead, we should be looking at it as blessings to reform us, to strengthen us so that we can pay it forward. And that requires a lot of compassion, and that requires a lot of empathy. So God is telling Rasulullah that, when the beggar comes to you, when the person seeking knowledge comes to you, give them out of what we have provided you. So all the wealth that we have, all the intelligence that we have, all the wisdom that we have is from Allah at the end of the day. And in order for us to show gratitude, number one, we can say Alhamdulillah, but what is a greater action of gratitude than paying it forward, than giving back from what Allah has given us to the community, to our family first and foremost, to ourselves, first and foremost, we have to realize the blessing of Allah. Then we can give it to our families, we can give it to our communities, and we can spread out that way. And the last ayah of the surah, فَأَمَّا بِنِعْمَةِ رَبِّكَ فَحَدِّثْ. Very, very profound to conclude the surah. And from the blessing of your Lord, فَأَمَّا بِنِعْمَةِ رَبِّكَ فَحَدِّثْ. Profess it, communicate it. And what is this blessing that Rasulullah had been given? The Quran. And he was in charge of communicating it to the people. This was a great blessing from Allah, the likes of which no other prophet had received. It says in Surah Isra, and we have favored some prophets over others. And to Dawood alayhi salam we gave the Psalms. But if you look at the Quran, it's encompassing. It says in Surah Ma'idah that it is a muhaymana. The Quran is a guardian over the rest of the scriptures. Just to make sure the other scriptures don't give us false statements about God, the Quran was sent down as a guardian, as a preserving message to make sure all those scriptures are in check. So Rasulullah was given a huge gift from Allah. فَأَمَّا بِنِعْمَةِ رَبِّكَ فَحَدِّثْ. So communicate it, profess it. And so anything that we have been given of goodness in our lives, we have to communicate. We can't just keep it to ourselves and be stingy, or hide it, We have to give it back. We have to profess it forward. So the three categories, once again, was number one, of consolation. Sometimes you can have negative emotions. So God is there to pull us out of that negative thinking, being like, no, your God has not left you, nor has He abandoned you. And the akhirah is better for you than the beginning, only if you profess submission to me and follow the path that I have directed for you. The second category, and He will give you so much that you will be very content. So that contentment is promised to us. The second category is to look back into our history. We are very forgetful to remind ourselves of where we've come from. So there's no obstacle. Once you really realize where you've come from and the challenges you've faced, there's no obstacle big enough for you to conquer. God is letting us know, And He's letting Prophet know, you've been through a lot. He's letting Nabi Musa know, you've been through a lot. So now don't be scared that the message is coming to you. To Prophet Musa, when the message came to him, it says he saw the snake, he put his staff down and turned to a snake, and he ran in the other direction. He was so scared, and Allah said, no, the messengers do not have fear around me, come back. Don't be shook by the fact that the truth is coming to you now. So He's reminding us of where we've been through, and that we have developed that courage to now absorb what He's giving to us in the Quran. And this Quran speaks to each and every one of us in ways that are unimaginable. And Qasim, we were speaking about that. You told me something very profound, that the Quran actually speaks to you. When you open it up at nighttime before you sleep, it's like that's the miracle, It knows what you need and it gives you that in that moment. So there's the second category of taking us back to the history, reminding us, preparing us for our mission. Each of us have a mission. We came into the life with nothing, it says in the Quran. You came as a baby, you didn't know anything. We vested you with hearts. We vested you with intelligence. We vested you with the eyesight and the hearing. So now what are you going to do with all these things? So the third category then answers that. Okay? Everything that you've been through, empathize with the people, pay it forward, give it back to the community, profess the ni'mah of Allah, and inshallah we can all be of the ones that reflect upon the Quran, you know, and that ones who can remember, because we're very forgetful as human beings. Remember what we've been through, you know. Remember where we came from. Remember why we're here. What is our purpose? And most importantly, remember where we're going. And the Quran answers all three of these questions. Answers the question of where we came from. It answers the question, what is our purpose right now? And lastly, it answers the question of where we're heading. And inshallah, we can all be blessed to enter the gates of paradise. And inshallah, God can forgive us of our sins. And inshallah, God can forgive our family, our children, and then Allah can make our children ones that are blessed with the message of Allah, and that can be muttaqina imama, that can be the imam of the ones who have taqwa, inshallah. And with that, I'd like to end the first portion of the khutbah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Wal asr. Innal insana lafi khusr. Illa alladhina amanu wa amilu salihati wa tawasaw bil haqqi wa tawasaw bis sabr. Salawat. Muhammad. Allahumma salli. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulullah. So for the second portion of the khutbah, I just want to draw our attention to the story of Rasulullah. The story of Rasulullah is basically an archetype of the fight against evil. Okay? There is professed in the Quran that there is always a fight between evil and goodness. Okay? Darknesses versus light. It's a very balanced book in the sense that it creates pairings of everything. And so the story of Prophet Muhammad is a great archetype of what it feels like to fight that battle against evil. So primarily, as we established in the first portion of the khutbah, Rasulullah found himself in a place of ignorance, in a place of darkness. And currently in the world that we live in, we are entering, if not fully inside, ignorance and darknesses. Because everything that is said in the Quran, in terms of Sharia, is being violated currently on a global scale. So in the story of Nabi Shu'aib alayhi salam, it is the message that he came with is don't cheat the people, you know. Give them full measure. And what is happening in the world right now? There's a lot of cheating in business. There's no concept of giving full measure. All about me. You know, I'm going to take what's good for me. I'm going to look out for me. And so in the story of Nabi Lut, for example, what was it that was creating the darknesses? It was immorality, fahsha. You know, immorality in ways that, you know, that God said, like, they were in their intoxication blind, wandering blindly. And what do we see being pushed in the world right now? Are agendas which are completely contrary, and there's no doubt about it. You know, to all the apologists, there's no reason, there's no argument that the Quran is in any way, you know, tolerant towards these things. It has defined it clearly as a fahsha, as an immorality. So we look at all these things, even the concept of our financial system being run on interest. In Surah Baqarah, it is said to Rasul, it is revealed in the Quran that anyone who does not give up earnings from interest right now, if you do give up, we will forgive you for past violations. But if you do not give up, be certain that God and the Prophet is going to wage a war against you. So the entire system, banking system, we find ourselves in darknesses. Everything that the Quran has mentioned, the society we're living in is in complete darknesses. So now, Rasulullah stood up in his journey to these darknesses. So we see a great journey in the 23-year period of stages of Rasulullah's jihad, his battle, his strife against this ignorance and this darkness. At first they mocked him, you know. So one thing, once you stand up for truth, first you'll feel mocking. Everyone's going to mock you, everyone's going to judge you, everyone's going to just dismiss you based on laughing you away. Then they'll try to tempt you. Like it says in Surah Al-Isra, they nearly tempted you, O Rasulullah, by changing the message, and they would have promised you things in this world. But if you would have inclined, you would have certainly inclined toward them had we not strengthened your heart from within. And if you would have inclined, then there would have been double punishment for you in this world and double punishment in the after. So if we know certain things, certain evils that are happening, and we give into it, God is saying you're going to get double punishment. You know it. Don't incline towards them. So that's the second stage. The first stage is mockery. The second stage is tempting you away from worldly pleasures. That's what Satan does, is that he deludes you by, what is that? Shane? Gilder? Dajjal? What does it mean? Dajjal in its essence means someone who paints things over with gold. Ordinary thing. To kind of just lure us into the worldly life. So the second stage is temptation from the worldly life that Satan tries to pull you away from. Then thirdly, if you see, is like Rasulullah he said, if you put the moon in my right hand and the sun in my left hand, I will never stop preaching the word of Allah. Subhanallah. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Then if that doesn't work, what did they do? They try to drive you out of the land. And they try to attack you. So I want to tie this into what happened to Imran Khan earlier this week, you know. He is our example right now of someone who's standing up against this oppression, this tyranny. He's a truth seeker. And so he knew what he's getting into. After he got shot in the leg, he had the tasbih in his hand, you know. And he starts every speech of his إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. You know, he declares the oneness of Allah. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. And he is following in the footsteps of Rasulullah, as we see right now. So he got shot. There's nothing new under the sun, the Quran is saying. The story of Rasulullah is telling us there's nothing new under the sun. So what do they try to do? They try to attack you, and they try to attack Rasulullah. Imam Ali, alayhi salatu wassalam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa alayhi, was in the bed of Rasulullah. And Rasulullah fled because they were after his life. The third stage is when you do migrate as a community to repel this evil. I've rejected it, I want to get away from it. They won't stop at that. In the story of Ashab al-Kahf, in Surah al-Kahf, you know, God said when they woke up from a 300-year-long sleep that he put the people into, because they were trying to seek refuge, so he put them to sleep to let them know what happened 300 years later. He said, be sure you keep a low profile, because if you go out and they find out that you are professing your religion to Allah, they will stone you to death until you come back to their creed. So evil does not just leave you when you reject it, it wants to make you part of their creed. So this is another story we can learn from the Quran. And so even in Rasulullah, when he left for Medina, what happened? All the wars that he fought were defensive wars. They were defensive wars, no matter how much the Western media likes to turn it around on us and tell us that we're aggressive. No, it was a defensive jihad. And so they weren't satisfied that Rasulullah had rejected and was living in peace. They wanted to make him come back to their creed. You know, they wanted to pull him back. And then at the end of, obviously, there's the fath. And there is the victory that Allah has promised us. But with a test, it says in Surah Al-Baqarah, surely we will test you with hunger and fear. It says in Surah Al-Baqarah. Surely when you're in the path of Allah, you will get tested with hunger and fear. You know, Surah Al-Imran, if wounds have touched you, like wounds have already touched the enemy. Do you think that we will let you enter Jannah without you being tested? It says in the Quran. Beginning of Surah Al-Ankabut. And do you think that just because you said you're a believer that now you won't get tested? So Imran Khan professed that he is rejecting this evil, this corruption that is presented in Pakistan, this establishment-run government. And we see it all around the world. Bolsonaro, Lula, you know what just happened there. There's a huge strife, there's a huge battle going on in the world. We have to realize our purpose right now. You know, we have to go back in history and see, why am I here? What is going on? Is there a battle of darkness versus light? Is it enough just for me to look at the story of Rasulullah and not apply it to my daily life? Read the Quran but not apply it to my daily life? No, there's plenty of ways that we can apply it to our daily lives. And the story of Rasulullah is a great example. And what Imran Khan is doing is very, very respectable. And he's following the footsteps of Rasulullah. And he is following that great archetype that is always presented. And for us to gain courage is that if we do decide to get on the right path, we will face these challenges. And there will come a point where we have to really decide between black and white, between night and daylight. And when we wake up, it's hard to go back to sleep. I remember you telling my father one day that when you drop the kids, Shane, right? When you drop the kids off early in the morning, now you had to wake up much earlier with the kids. Once the tirka, you said, once the sunlight hits you, I can't go back to sleep, right? So it's very similar, Once the verses of the Quran hit your heart, you can't go back to sleep. And every time in the Quran, when it talks about the water coming down to fertilize the land and create a resurrection almost, right after that it talks about the revelation. It talks about the Quran. So this is the analogy being made. It's a spiritual resurrection. The Quran gives us a spiritual resurrection. And once we have awakened to that spiritual resurrection, it's very hard to go back to sleep. I just want to do some prayers for the world, for ourselves, for our families. رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ آمين. ربنا اغفر لي ولوالدي وللمؤمنين يوم يقوم الحساب آمين. رب ارحمهما كما ربياني صغيرا آمين. ربنا اصرف عنا عذاب جهنم إن عذابها كان غراما إنها ساءت مستقرا ومقاما. ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين واجعلنا للمتقين إماما. ربنا ولا تحملنا ما لا طاقة لنا به واعف عنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا أنت مولانا فانصرنا على القوم الكافرين. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. أقم الصلاة. السلام عليكم.